Death connected to the powerful painkiller fentanyl is rattling the hearts of parents across the country. The drug is now suspected in the death of a 10-year-old boy in Miami. Authorities believe he somehow unknowingly came into contact with the drug on the street. And the spike in opioid calls has changed the way first responders handle these calls for help.
So what is the protocol today? 7 Eyewitness News reporter Ed Riley shows us the new investigative approach.
Fentanyl is so dangerous that when it's introduced with another narcotic, even in our case, which would be heroin, it could be 5,000 to 10,000 times more dangerous than morphine.
It only takes 2 milligrams of powdered fentanyl to kill a person, and this picture from the DEA shows how small that dose is. Even coming in contact with fentanyl can be deadly, and that's why the DEA is warning first responders to take extra precautions when responding to an overdose situation.
The worst thing you could do is wipe it off with your bare hand, or possibly wipe it away even with a glove up toward your face where it could be sent out airborne.
Illegal labs have made fentanyl more dangerous than ever.
The first responder has to protect themselves because they have to administer the aid. But ultimately that takes time.
New York State Police have to make sure they have more than the opioid antidote naloxone when they head out. Troopers also need to carry gloves, a mask, and carry a protective suit.
It's a tremendous issue for us. We're very concerned about our responders.
Ambulance crews working for AMR in Buffalo received this warning recently about the growing dangers of contact with fentanyl.
We also advise them to make sure that all of their skin is covered as best as it can be with a long sleeve shirt, a sweatshirt, a protective jacket, something like that.
These crews also need to have the proper protective gear to make sure they don't accidentally get fentanyl on their skin. The dangers of fentanyl also extend to canine drug dogs that sniff out the drugs.
We just have to be more aware of our surroundings and what we're getting into.
Besides watching out for themselves, canine handlers need to protect their animals, which cannot wear masks or gloves. And one of the big concerns for first responders is that drugs like fentanyl continue to be made more and more potent, meaning additional safety precautions might have to be taken in the future. In Clarence, Ed Riley, 7 Eyewitness News.
Nobody rendered assistance to this guy. Sister Central was telling me to give him air, to extricate him from under the wall. He was twisted under the wall.
I got him on the valid callback. It's coming from the city link box.
Yeah, I'm not OGA. I'm not interfering any further. I went to save the guy's life.
No, I understand that, but it's just that because this is a private establishment.
Yeah, I understand. But it's just, there's a point where I'm not OGA. You understand? I'm not interfering any further.
There's a difference between OGA and whether a private establishment wants you here or not. As of right now, they say you can stay, right?
Thank you, but I'm saving the guy's life. I'm not interfering with their operation. The guy was dying under the door.
Sir, there's a difference between them wanting you here, or you saving somebody's life has nothing to do with whether they want you here or not. You have to understand that, right? They're saying that right now, as long as you're not interfering, you can stay, right? But what I'm trying to say is...
So you save a guy's life in a private establishment, security gets their panties in a tie-up, and now all of a sudden, it becomes an issue. This is for saving somebody's life in the bathroom. On an OD from a possible fentanyl overdose. Central was even asking me, can you do chest compressions in case he loses consciousness any further? I was BLS for a long time.
Well, sir, I thank you for guiding.
No, it's not even it's a point of human consciousness, you know what I mean? You're not going to allow somebody to just die right there, you know what I mean?
I'm saying I thank you for guiding me.
You know how many overdoses I come across all the time?
You're getting it wrong.
No, I'm not knocking you guys, because you're ALS, you understand? But there's a problem with the 911 system.
Oh, I agree.
You understand? In the reception of the call and the dispatching, by the time it takes from point A to point B, you have crazy time.
Just let them do their work. Just let them do their work.
Whatever you want to do. Want to take two while you're at it? Want to take two while you're at it? Pick up the RV.
See me, brother? That's me. 18 years. Take a look. 18 years. I'm a fireman 18 years here, okay? We have New York first responders on scene rendering emergency medical aid. The gentleman is conscious now. They gave him Narcan to give him a rapid response. See, the problem with these responses is that when you have any possibility of fentanyl being even airborne, now you have the potential for first responders are now in danger of becoming contaminated with the possible fentanyl that might be airborne, such as the cases like in Ohio and other jurisdictions. So they're going to have to change their response mode for universal precaution. Face masks, possible air breathers, because unfortunately if you have airborne fentanyl that's airborne in the air, you risk the first responders being potentially contaminated from it. With the amount of fentanyl that's being found in heroin and other narcotics these days, the first responders are in potential danger of contamination. Fentanyl is no joke. It doesn't take much to render somebody unconscious and even possible death. So we have to figure out new ways to protect first responders who are responding to these incidents. It's no longer a BLS, ALS situation anymore. Universal precaution, guys. God bless. There's your first responders. 24/7 on the job. God bless you. Universal precaution. So the gentleman is alert and conscious at this time. They rendered him very conscious with the Narcan. But this is a problematic situation at this facility because you have a park across the street here where
This bathroom is going to be down for
you
a
have
while.
K2,
Right now,
you have a lot of heroin activity, and unfortunately this is a community problem where the businesses are trying to conduct business, but you have a lot of people who are, susceptible to drug activity, and unfortunately you can't mix both of them. So it puts a strain on the community, it puts a strain on the businesses because they have a right to do business. That's what they're here for. But when you have this much drug activity in this neighborhood, they tend to come here and do their business here. And unfortunately, these situations occur where you have, overdoses and, you don't know what's in the drugs these days. And unfortunately, with fentanyl now becoming a powdery substance where it's airborne now, first responders and other activity. So, you have security on site that are, walking into these areas. And unfortunately, if you're not using universal precaution medically, where you're using masks, if you have anybody with a heroin overdose and there's fentanyl in the heroin, and they're using it from the powder where they're cooking it up, that fentanyl possibly becomes airborne as well. And first responders have come into situations where they responded to overdoses and the fentanyl was airborne. And they become contaminated, they become life-threatening situations because, unfortunately, first responders and other people are responding on site, breathing in the fentanyl. Watch your back. Breathing in this contaminated fentanyl, and they get sick from the fentanyl now. So they have to screen off the area completely and actually respond like in a hazmat situation because that fentanyl now becomes airborne. So first responders, security personnel, maintenance personnel, all get a touch of it. And, you don't know how bad the fentanyl, it doesn't take much. A couple of grains can take somebody straight out. And this is what's in the narcotics that's being sold in the street out here. And it's very dangerous. In the Midwest, we've had a couple of cases where law enforcement and paramedics have come onto the scene of overdoses and didn't know that there was fentanyl that was airborne. And when they went into these enclosed areas, they breathed that stuff in, not knowing that it was airborne. And that's why they're going to have to change their medical response mode. And it's unfortunate because in the East Coast, you don't see it as much, but Midwest, California, you see a lot of where the fentanyl is actually airborne, and it's pretty bad because they have to really they have to clean out the air, and universal precaution for everybody because this is a learning lesson. This is a learning lesson, and the way the situation is, it's not safe for anybody. If there's fentanyl that's airborne in the air, everybody's at risk of getting it. So unfortunately, you really have to use top precautionary measures to protect not only the patient but the first responders. Because I'm not sure now, but I think we've lost several first responders responding to heroin overdoses where there was fentanyl present, airborne. It's not just in the needle injector, it's not just in the bloodstream, but it's also in the air. And so you really have to use precautionary measures. This should be treated as a hazmat situation, even though it is a biological situation. When you're dealing with drugs with a mixture of fentanyl and this other stuff that they're putting in all the narcotics, you really have to use top priority precautionary measures. Universal precaution to all first responders, and treat this as a hazmat. Don't go in without a mask, because this is going to be a situation where you breathe just a little bit. If there had been fentanyl, you would have had several people here that would have had to have been treated at the hospital as a hazmat, because fentanyl is no joke. It only takes a little bit to kill you, and unfortunately there's more and more fentanyl that's being found. We had several busts in Mount Vernon. It was enough to kill 14 million people. In Virginia, there was a bust where there was enough to kill the whole population of the city of New York. So when you consider that it only takes a little bit of fentanyl to do you in, when you respond, hold on one second. I worked in Harlem. So when you consider that you're dealing with more danger as a first responder into these medical incidents, then you get these private institutions that, they want to play the God factor. And it's like, all right, next time he's trapped under a wall, or you have somebody that's rendered unconscious because you people are negligent, because they can't control what goes on here, So they get frustrated, and then they turn around and they want to act arrogant because this is to cover up for their negligence. That's a joke. This is Wholefoods, okay? Wholefoods on Houston and Christie. This is how they deal with their fuck-ups. They can't control their customers' behavior, so they have to act in, cover-up mode. So when you try to render emergency assistance in here, you become the liability to them because obviously they can't control the crowd.
go to the bathroom, so the bathroom's closed at this time. It's closed right now.
Who is this guy?
Nah. I'm so used to it. It's regular. It's like I've been doing this over 15 years. It's the same. And this is better. It used to be a lot worse than this.
Oh yeah, way worse. It used to be several times a day in here.
I mean, today, I think we had one 2 days ago. Oh yeah. Yeah. I heard about the beds and stuff like that. Like somebody had like napkins up there. I don't blame you, mommy.
So this, yep. So this is unfortunately how the businesses and what the businesses have to go through, because you have multiple people out here that are just, using, and it's getting worse. It's getting much worse. And so businesses are struggling to deal with this, and unfortunately there's not really much of a community response from your politicians and your delegates out here to deal with this. It's all connected with the homeless program and the pandemic, because they're not doing anything with the homeless community. You've heard me speak on this before. We go before the council, hopefully, to speak on this matter shortly, and because there's really no solution being remedied here. It's just not happening. And unfortunately, it's going to get worse. And what's going to happen is you're going to risk having employees, first responders, getting sick. And it's unfortunate. Innocent people are going to be affected by this eventually. So unfortunately, innocent people are going to be affected by this, Because if they start putting more and more lethal doses of fentanyl in the drugs, it's going to get much worse.
That is better.
Anyway, this is how they deal with it now. This is a hazmat screening here. Wholefoods, Christie and Houston, Manhattan, New York City.
Alarming, epidemic, deadly. Words federal officials use to describe a growing opioid problem and a growing risk to emergency personnel who respond to drug overdose calls.
The spread of fentanyl means that any encounter a law enforcement officer has with unidentified white powder can be extremely dangerous.
Please don't field test in your car or on the street.
A new video warning to first responders from the Drug Enforcement Administration educates emergency officials about the effects of the powerful drug fentanyl. In particular, it's 50 times more powerful than heroin, and overdose is possible by just touching a tiny amount. The DEA is telling first responders to carry gloves, masks, and other protective gear, and to avoid field testing any substance if they don't know what it is. The video includes accounts from first responders who learned just how easy it can be to overdose in the field, similar to what happened to deputies in Harford County who were exposed to fentanyl just last month. Corporal Kevin Phillips thought he was going to die.
I envisioned, because I'd seen it hundreds of times, I just didn't want, I pictured myself lying on the ground and EMS trying to revive me.
Since then, the Harford County Sheriff's Department has issued what they're calling go bags with masks, gloves, gowns, Tyvek suits, and arm sleeves. Other jurisdictions are considering new safety measures as well. We spoke with Officer Jennifer Peach just hours after she said Baltimore County officials discuss additional protective gear for officers beyond the gloves, goggles, and masks they're already using in the field.
So we're investigating what other agencies are doing and trying to see if at this point we can come up with something additional that we can use for our officers every day out on the road to help keep them safer.
So just a couple of stats here about drug overdoses. Preliminary numbers show as many as 60,000 deaths last year, and overdoses are now the leading cause of death among people under 50 years old. Reporting live in Towson tonight, Kyrie, WBAL TV 11.